My name is Amy House, and I'm also here with Mary Ellen, and we are two care navigators for Tembo Health, and we are part of the Medicare Guide program with Tembo. I'm also the host of the Think Dementia podcast, so I welcome you to listen to that and to just look for the Tembo Health YouTube channel because we have been uploading all of our recordings now to that channel. I'm also trying out something new today and seeing if Mary Ellen can put a copy of today's presentation in the chat box for you to download. And I'm also including a wonderful little poster by Teepa Snow that goes over the different gems. And I am adding her to that as well. One side of it has the bullet points about that stage of the disease, and the other side has a paragraph from that person's point of view. And I just love that. It is absolutely lovely. Now, this is a Teepa Snow presentation. I am an independently certified Teepa Snow trainer with Positive Approach to Care. I've been working with Teepa and her team for about 12 years now, so I've done this presentation many times. But if you want to know more, I really recommend you go to teepasnow.com, where you can find more resources from Teepa. She's amazing, and she's a world-renowned expert with dementia, and she comes from an occupational therapy background, which just makes it so practical and hands-on for caregivers. Teepa came up with the GEMS abilities years ago, and she did this based on the Allen cognitive disability theory, which is a scale, and there are multiple scales when you are talking about the stages of someone's dementia. It is difficult at sometimes because sometimes it's referred to as early, middle, or late. And that can be confusing because somebody may think, oh, my mother was just diagnosed, so she's in the early stages. But really, most people don't get diagnosed until they're in the middle stages. And also there are scales like the Allen Cognitive Disability Theory that go from 1 to 7 and other ones that go from 7 to 1. And that can be difficult to know where you are. If you're a 2 on that scale, where are you? Is that the early stage or is that the very late stage? You may hear your neurologist say things like mild, moderate, and severe. And again, those are really general terms, but the GEMS are created to have a real good discussion about understanding where somebody is at, how to meet them there, because with the right care and the right setting, every gem can shine. And I love that about it. The other part of the thing to know about GEMS is that a gem can change throughout the day. So somebody's stages when it comes to GEMS might change throughout the day. They definitely can change if somebody has an illness or injury, but we're looking at in general, where are they at most of the time? Somebody may be a bright diamond in the morning, but by evening, they're a very confused emerald. And so just know that not everything is perfect, right? Because everybody is so unique with their dementia. And then there's different types of dementia as well. Some dementias really progress very slowly over time. Some of them have very steep changes that happen very suddenly. And everybody has different memory abilities based on the type of dementia they have. I know people with vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia that have a great memory and really understand where they're at and what's going on, but they really struggle with executive function or other parts of their activities of daily living. So when I'm talking today, I am going to be talking a lot about kind of the view from Alzheimer's, because that is 60 to 80% of people living with dementia, they have Alzheimer's. But I also want you to know that, you know, every dementia starts differently. That's how they get their names. That's how they are identified in the brain, what the cause is. But every dementia ends the same. In all my experience over many, many years of being at the bedside of many people with different types of dementia, they all still end the same. So although you might find some things in here that don't apply to you, you will find some things that are helpful for planning for the future. The other thing that can be really difficult at times is understanding this if you are a person living with dementia. This may be something that is really difficult for someone living with dementia to hear about their future. And I do want to just caution that if someone's living with dementia, this might not be the presentation for them. All right, so the sapphire, diamond, emerald, amber, ruby, and pearl. These are the different gems that Teepa has identified. And we're going to start with the sapphire. So the sapphire is true blue. This is you and I on a really good day with no dementia. It's the baseline for the entire GEMS model. And a sapphire is just somebody who is a senior and they are having the usual senior aging where they may sometimes forget an appointment because they didn't write it down, but it's not dementia because they do remember making the appointment. And the other thing is that sapphires can change based on something going on with them. It could be something medical. Oh, we seem to have something going on. If Mary Ellen possibly, or Mary Anthony, want to check your mute. Thank you. The other thing with sapphires is if there's a change, it's really important to go to a doctor because with the sapphire model, these are seniors that have normal aging. And as we get older, we should still be able to do the things that we used to do. It may take longer. It may be that we have to write a bunch of notes. I use an example of my mother, who's a sapphire and doesn't have dementia. And when we had a karaoke business, she had to color code all the different chords and where they went into the switchboard so that she could learn how to set that up. And so it took her longer to figure out than myself, who at the time was in my 20s. And I would just walk up and go click, click, click and put it all together. So with the sapphire, things might take longer and they may need to write things down. People might also feel blue at times because there's a lot of changes going on and it takes a lot of empathy to really support anybody who's a senior who might be going through the loss of a spouse or family members or friends. They may be losing their home and moving to a new community. There's a lot that goes on. The important message with a sapphire is if something is not normal, that you go and get it looked at by the doctor. There are many things out there that mimic dementia, like infections, vitamin deficiencies, thyroid problems, hearing loss. All of these are things that can mimic dementia symptoms. And so it's really important to go to the primary care physician, ask for a good workup to see what's causing this confusion, and then get a referral to neurology. Now, if somebody is also wondering, maybe it is dementia, and you get confirmation of that, that can be really scary. But the important thing is if you intervene early, there are now treatments that are available and symptom management that's available. And those are the most successful in those early stages. So we really want to encourage our loved ones to get to a doctor to have a good workup and get checked out if as a sapphire, something doesn't appear normal. But today we're talking mostly about dementia, so I'm going to go on to the dementia gems now. The first one is the diamond stage. Now, Teepa chose a diamond because diamonds can be really clear and sharp at times. There may be times where they are able to remember everything and they are functioning very well. There may be times where they can cut you. A diamond is very sharp and they can cut you. And what that means is that sometimes diamonds are aware of some cognitive changes that are happening in these early stages of dementia, and they don't want you in their business. Okay. They may say, get out of my papers, get out of my papers. I've got everything organized. I've been doing these my whole life. Leave these alone. And you may think, okay, all right. They know how to push your buttons. They do know what to say that might make you back away from the situation because they're confused or they're embarrassed that they need help. But diamonds are very, very independent with their activities of daily living. So diamonds are still dressing themselves. They do really well with a great routine. Most diamonds live in assisted living, independent living, or at home. And many diamonds out there live alone, but do very well with a routine. It's important that you're supporting them with maybe more complicated matters like finances or making sure that they're taking their medications, but really having that day-to-day not change and being in that environment they know can keep them independent a long time. Sometimes diamonds can be very hard and rigid and inflexible. You may approach them with an idea of a new medication machine that's going to help them with their medications, and they might dismiss it right away. And I think many people out there know what I'm talking about. When you talk with a diamond, sometimes they're not always reasonable, and they can't always see things from everybody else's point of view. So it's very important to talk gently with a diamond, make sure that they know you're there to support them and that you're not there to take over. Now, one thing that a diamond has is many facets. And facets are the different ways that every time you look at it in different lights or from different angles, a diamond can sparkle. And so people are seeing them from different angles and different situations. And usually at this stage, many people in a family or maybe with professionals are arguing about whether or not the person has dementia. And so just know that you may have somebody who in the morning is super sharp and super clear, and somebody who visits them every morning thinks that they are totally fine. And then by the evening, they're repeatedly calling a family member confused or thinking that there's somebody in their house, maybe having some paranoia. These are all things that can sometimes divide a family with wondering whether or not something's going on. The important part is that if you think something's going on, let's get it checked out. Because again, it's not normal to have that confusion or that paranoia that they might have. It's not normal to be losing things all the time if that wasn't their personality before, and we want to get them checked out. Now, diamonds can really shine if you break everything down into small steps. I used to run a memory care for years, and the diamonds that were in my neighborhood, they were my administrative assistants, and I just loved them. They would be helping me with paperwork all the time. But if I went up to them and I said, hey, I'd like you to organize these by date, and then I want you to cut the big ones in half, and then I want you to organize those by date as well, and put 4 of each of the little ones together in piles, and use a paper clip so that people don't get them mixed up. That's way too much information for a diamond. So I would simply just start with, I want you to put these in order by date. And they would sit there and get to work for me. And then I'd say, okay, now we're going to cut all these large ones in half. And they would sit and do that. So diamonds really can help, and they really can do so much in the home still. There's activities you can get them involved in, but they just may need things broken down into small steps, little bite-sized chunks that they can digest. Now we're going to talk about emeralds. Emeralds are green because green means go. And what can happen with emeralds are they are going back in time. And there's a change happening to them. Teepa picked the emerald because if you look at an emerald gem, every single one of them has a little speck inside them. It's kind of a little flaw that they have, and they're not really aware of it. So when somebody is in the emerald stage, they may be going back in time. That might indicate they're in the emerald stage. Or it may be that they need help, but they don't know they need help. So let's talk about the ones that travel in time first. Many times when somebody is traveling in time and they are saying things like, I have to go pick up the children, or I need to find my husband, and you know their husband has passed away. What's happening is there is a visual or something that's reminding them of that person that they want to see, or that task or job that they think they need to do. And they connect that with their long ago memories. So when somebody has short-term memory loss, that memory loss gets worse and worse. And there are times where they just cannot access recent events, even as recent as 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And they may then be basing all of their information and what they're going to do on their long ago memories. I'm going to give you the example of my grandpa. When he was a diamond, grandma didn't know, nobody knew that he had dementia. They were arguing all the time because he was saying really wild things and misspeaking about lots of things. And she just thought he was being difficult. He was doing great with a routine. And one of his favorite routines was to go ahead and mow the lawn around the farm. So this is a retired farm. They had sold the cows and they had sold all the land around the farm, but they still had a big lawn, and he would love to mow the lawn. It was a great routine that he was good at. One day, Grandma looked out the window and she saw Grandpa going down the neighbor's hayfield with the lawnmower. And she ran out there and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "It's going to rain. I got to get the hay made. I got to get the hay in the barn." That was a shock to my grandma. And what I imagine happened with my grandpa is he's on the lawnmower and he can't remember what he's doing or where he's at. And so he uses his visuals and he connects them with his long ago memories. He notices he's on a riding tractor. He thinks, "This is my tractor." He notices that the field, the hay is getting really high. That needs to be cut. And he maybe sees some clouds in the sky that thinks, "I better get going on this because it's going to rain." And he still had a barn and thought that barn is filled with cows because in his long ago memories, that those are the things that were happening in his mind. So he put that all together and said, "I've got to go. I've got to get this hay made." And sometimes you can do something to help the person through that. And so I'm not sure what my grandma did at that time. She's no longer alive for me to talk about it. But I do know he ended up in the emergency room and that he was eventually diagnosed with dementia. And they said it was likely Alzheimer's, but at the time they couldn't tell. And grandma probably ran out there and said, "What are you talking about? You're not a farmer anymore. There's no cows in the barn. This is ridiculous. Get off the lawnmower." I'm sure it was a big situation that probably didn't go over very smooth. Now, if I would have been in that situation, knowing what I know now, because once you know better, you do better, I maybe would have come up with something like, "Oh, okay, you're working on the hay. You know what? It's lunchtime. You go in and have lunch. I'm going to keep going on the tractor for you." And seeing if I could maybe take the problem or the situation off of his shoulders and let him know I'm going to take care of it. Another example that I like to talk about was a woman who I worked with in home care, and she was staying up late at night and refusing to go to bed because she thought that she thought that her brother and sister-in-law were driving from another state and that they hadn't arrived yet, and she was very worried about them. Well, her husband knew that they had passed on many years ago. Nobody was coming to visit, and he tried to explain that. And one thing you'll never do is win an argument with someone with dementia. So eventually, after some coaching and some ideas, he told her when she got upset at night, he said, "You know what? I'm going to turn on every light in the house and I'm going to stay up and wait for them. And if I'm concerned, I will wake you, but I'm sure they're almost here. So you go ahead and go to bed. I'm going to just wait for them." So that was a way to go with her reality, which is what you have to do with emeralds. And it's very difficult. It's sometimes like doing improv comedy. You're just kind of on your toes. You don't know what they're going to say and you don't know how to respond. But with more and more practice, you start to learn the phrases that really resonate with them. And you start to figure out what you could say that is going to make them know that you believe them, that you're on their side, but that also we don't have to worry about this right now. I want to give another example because reality orientation is something that people used to do. This is what they used to do in nursing homes when somebody was confused about the time. And when somebody would say, "I'm looking for my husband," they would say to them, "Your husband died 15 years ago." Now, again, if they don't have access to that memory right now, that is like hearing it for the first time. That is very difficult to hear. And so the usual situation calls for going along with it. I had a woman that I witnessed her family telling her dad died 15 years ago. His urn is up on the cabinet. And she broke down and was so upset. She was wondering why she wasn't at a funeral. She said she hated them all because they kept her away from the funeral. She just was so upset. So we decided to get together and put together a picture book. And it had 10 photos. Each photo was from a period in her life, from early years all the way till the end to present time. And when she said she was looking for her husband, I told her, I don't think I've met your husband, but I want to help you find him. Let's go look at some photos so I can help you." And then we would go and we'd start at the beginning of the book. And as we go through that book, we would see some times where she would talk about, "Here's my brother, here we are, we had to sell the farm. Mom was so mad when we had to sell the farm and move to the city. Oh, here is my husband." And she would just pause and look at those pictures of him. And sometimes that would gently bring her back. And she would pause and say, "Oh, I miss him so much." And I would say, "Well, what do you miss most? What did you do together?" And she'd say, "We walked. We walked and walked and walked. Oh, we just walked around the park all the time." "Great. Well, how about after dinner, you and I go for a walk in the park?" And she'd be all about that. And then I would redirect her to say, "Let's go set the table." So what I did there was I was living in her reality. When she slowly came back, I knew that let's do something that will help you feel connected to your husband still. And then I redirected to a different conversation. Now, if the whole beginning of that would have started with, "I'm looking for my husband," and I would have said, "Let's go set the table," that's not going to fly. Okay. Because if you really think your husband is missing and he doesn't know where you are and you don't know where he is, nobody wants to go set the table. They want to figure this out. So it may be also that when we went through that book, we would start going through the pictures of her and her husband, and then we'd look at the pictures of the children and the grandchildren, and we'd go through the whole book, and she would have such a good time telling me the stories from those pictures that she would forget that she was looking for him. And at the end of that, I would say, "That was beautiful. Let's go set the tables." Another thing with emeralds, if they are not traveling back in time, another reason somebody may be in the emerald stage is because they need help and they don't know it. And what's happening now is that the brain is losing control of some of that finesse, the finesse that they've learned their whole life, learning and growing up on how to do things the right way, how to put your clothes on the right way, how to take a shower and use the shampoo, how to cut up your food before eating it. All of those are skills that we learn. And when we're about 3 or 4 years old, our brain says, "I want to do it. I want to try everything." So if you've ever had a 3 or 4 year old, I use the example of my little cousins when they were young. I would say, "Okay, it's time for bed. Let's put the toothpaste on the toothbrush." And of course, what would they say? "I want to do it. No, no, I want to do it." And that's because their brain was telling them, "I need to learn all these skills. I need to learn that finesse of how much to squeeze the tube, and maybe too much comes out and I learn from it, or maybe not enough and I learn from it." So emeralds are losing that finesse. And the thing is, though, they are adults with an entire history of their life. And it can be very, very frustrating for them to suddenly need help with things that they've never needed help with before. This is a time where people are not showering, they're not changing their clothes might be dirty, and they don't see anything wrong with it because they think they already changed their clothes, or they think they shower on their own, but they haven't had a shower in weeks. I many times would work with emeralds who would want to make sure that I wasn't telling them what to do. And that's one of the most important things about emeralds. They need a friend and not a boss. And I know this is a webinar, so you all have to visualize this. But one of the things that I would talk about that Teepa gave me as a great example is, if you walked into a restaurant and you were meeting your friend for lunch and your zipper was down, what would you do if your friend walked up to you and grabbed you by the zipper and zipped it up and said, "Oh, let me take care of that"? Most of us would probably have a very negative reaction to a friend of ours walking up and grabbing our pants. That's just not normal, right? That's weird. Friends don't do that. And that's the same thing with emeralds. If you're doing things to an emerald and not with them, you're going to have a fight. And so a friend would say, "Hey, psst," and they would gently show you that your zipper is down, or they'd whisper to you or take you to a corner to show you. And they would let you try to zip your own zipper. And then if after a long time you really, really could not get that zipper up, a friend would ask permission to help. A friend would say, "Can I try? Do you want me to try?" Because after a few minutes, I probably would let my friend help me with my zipper if I really couldn't get it up. So that's an example of how it is important to work with emeralds. Emeralds do not want people doing things to them. They are very capable. They need things broken down into very small steps of one thing at a time. Instead of telling an emerald, hey, it's time to brush your teeth and expecting them to go in there and know what to do, it's more important to give them good visuals and show that I've taken out the toothbrush, I put the toothpaste on it, I'm handing it to you, and then I'm going to motion on my own body how to brush my teeth. And the best thing to do with an emerald, especially if you're a spouse and you share a bathroom anyways, is to do things together. I'm going to brush my teeth and you're going to brush yours. And that way they can just watch you and they can see how it's being done. So one of the things with emeralds, though, is that they are still very helpful. They can still engage in a lot of wonderful tasks and they can help out at home, but it has to be very simplified into one step. The emeralds that I would work with are helping with dusting. They're helping with sweeping or vacuuming. These are things that it's just one step that you're just doing over and over again. There's not a lot of choices and decisions to make. With emeralds, it's really important to think about ways to say you're sorry when you do overstep. And so these are some ways that Teepa has said you can say you're sorry. Again, you don't have to be the one who did anything, but the words I'm sorry really, really can help the situation. I'm sorry I was trying to help, or I'm sorry that I made you feel upset. I'm sorry that I made you feel like a child. I'm sorry that this happened, or I'm sorry this is so hard. Anytime you can say I'm sorry to a diamond or an emerald, it's going to really help the situation. Now we're going to talk about the next stage of the disease. And not everybody goes through the amber stage, but sometimes you have little pieces of it that show up. And if you are having an amber in your home or in your memory care, you know who the amber is. Everybody knows who the amber is because they are very, very busy. And I'm going to show you why. On this slide, this is a PET scan. And what we have here are 4 different people, 4 different brains, and two different photos of that brain from different angles. So on the left, where you see the word normal, if you look down, those are the same brain from 2 different angles. And the parts that are red and yellow are the parts that are firing for this test, and the parts that are blue are the parts that are not. Next to it, if you look at the word early Alzheimer's and go down, those 2 photos are of a person with early Alzheimer's. And it's just 2 different angles of that brain. So if you compare the top left brain to the one next to it, that's normal and early Alzheimer's. And you can see there are some differences. So there's a lot less red going on. There's a little bit more blue. And same thing with the bottom 2. The bottom left can be compared to the one next to it. And there's some changes that are happening. It's not a lot. There's still a lot of red and yellow on that early Alzheimer's. They're still able to do so many things. But next to that, the next column is for late Alzheimer's. And that is a photo, again, of somebody's brain in just 2 different angles. So when you look at under the words late Alzheimer's, the photos there, you can see that there's a lot of blue. There's very little red and yellow because at the end of this disease, that red and yellow is what they're left with. Next to that is a child's brain. We'll just say a 2-year-old. And you can see when you look and compare that late Alzheimer's and that child, how similar they are. So if you look at the brain, the small one on the top right, and then compare the one next to it, you can see some similarities. And if you take the one that's in the bottom left there, that small brain, and compare it to the one next to it, you can really see some very obvious similarities with what's lighting up for this test. And so the brain of somebody in the amber phase is a lot like the brain of somebody in the brain of a child who is 2 years old. Now, would you leave a 2-year-old home alone? Of course not. There are so many things that could happen, and that's what happens in this stage. They are unaware of safety. They will get into a lot of stuff because if you think about a 2-year-old's brain, what do? Right? Is a 2-year-old going to leave your house neat and organized if you step away for half an hour? No, they're going to pull everything out of the cupboards. They're going to want to taste things, hear things, throw things, slap things together, smear things on the wall, right? Because the 2-year-old's brain is saying, give me information. I need to learn everything about this world, and I want to use all my senses to do that. So their senses are also heightened. And when you have somebody in the amber stage, their brain is also saying, give me information. And their senses are also heightened. And so an amber is somebody who goes through this phase of getting into a lot of stuff. They are known to just go around, and anything that looks fun, anything that looks interesting, they're going to go ahead and pick that up, put it in their pocket, down their pants. They're going to carry things as, just as much as they can. They might put things in their mouth, which is really scary. An amber can also get confused about what's safe and what's not safe. Ambers can get into medications. Ambers can get into knives and sharp objects. If you or I took a drink from a cleaning chemical like bleach, we'd spit it out right away because it tastes bad. But in this stage of the disease, their taste buds may not be connecting with their brain to identify that as tasting bad. So an amber can open up a bottle of bleach and drink the entire one, which is very scary. Ambers can also walk out the front door anytime because they see something that looks enjoyable. They can get involved with maybe their own feces or urine and think that that's something interesting and smear it on the walls. This is a really difficult phase for somebody to go through when an amber situation is happening because they're not themselves. They're acting very differently, and you just have to know that their brain is trying to get information. Their brain is telling them, let's do this. What can really be helpful with an amber is that you can give them things to fidget with. You can give them things that are safe to put in their mouth. You can work with occupational therapy to see if there are any activities that might keep their attention. But if you think about the attention of a 2-year-old, it's not very long, right? It's just a couple seconds. If I tell a 2-year-old, sit here, I'll be right back, they're going to be up the moment I turn around. And it's the same with an amber. If you expect an amber to sit down and be safe on their own, it's not going to happen. The moment you walk out of the room, they're going to be up and into things. And that could be really scary because they might get into something that could hurt them. When they have this going on, there's a lot going on with their nerves. And so maybe you don't have an amber that's very busy, but you have somebody in this stage and it's represented by how sensitive their nerves are. Again, the brain is saying, give me information. So it's got a heightened sensory awareness. And so they may have signals too that are getting mixed up going to and from the brain. Somebody might feel like the feeling of a shower on them is painful. It's like nails. It's like pins and needles in them. They might feel that when you're giving them some lotion and a hand massage, suddenly they start screaming because it hurts. And why are you hurting me? And it's because their nerves are amplified. You should always treat the situation as they feel, because it may be easy for you to think, hey, I'm just giving you a hand massage with this lotion. Isn't it lovely? But if they're feeling pain, we want to acknowledge that and stop what we're doing. Now, the most nerves on your body are going to be in your mouth. You have the most nerves, also in the genitals, and then the palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. Think about how many cares happen there. So if you are having somebody in this amber stage, it may be that brushing their teeth really irritates them. It really feels awful to them. And so take things very slow, help them to do as much as they can by themselves. This is a good time to start using hand under hand or hand over hand assistance, where you're assisting them with holding the tool like the toothbrush and how to do it, but go at their pace. I once had an amber who just screamed and yelled because of the shower. She just hated it and she was fighting people. It was just not working. And so they asked me to come in and check out the situation. What I found with her is that because she was so sensitive to cold, She liked it better when we just left the water running over her head the whole time. Many times when you're caring for somebody, you tend to put the shower over their head and then you do the shampoo or the washing, take the water away when you're doing that, and then give it back to rinse everything off. But every time we took the water away, she was freezing. And that was just amplified sensations for her. So we found that just keeping that water going and just, she didn't care. She just was, she was like a drowned rat there. Just, it's coming down her face and it's coming down, but she was warm. And then she was able to tolerate it. The other thing we knew is that if we did any kind of touching that wasn't extremely light, it was going to be painful for her. So I trained the staff to say, if her body is moving at all with you washing her or washing her hair, you're doing it too much. You need to back off. So with her hair, there was no scalp massage. We were just washing the hair, trying to avoid touching her too much because it was painful to her. And then also when we were, washing her arms, if her head was moving a little bit, we were doing it too hard. We need to be even more careful with that. So an amber can really feel things that are not making sense to those around them, but you need to go at their pace and learn how to do things that work for them. Another thing with an amber is that they can get overly stimulated quite easy. And this is something you may see in many people in this stage of the disease. Maybe they don't have that busyness, maybe they're not into everything, but maybe you notice that when the room gets loud or when people are around, they either get really angry or upset or agitated, and you're just like, the fan just turned on. Why are they getting so upset? But it's because, again, their senses are amplified. So that fan all of a sudden sounds horrible to them. Or they might shut down. All of a sudden, everybody arrives for the holiday party. You're having a great time and they're falling asleep. And you're like, why aren't they talking with everybody? Why aren't they watching this? And it's because the brain says, this is too much. I can't handle it. I'm just going to go to sleep. All right, now we're going to talk about vision changes with this dementia. And in those earlier stages, if you have the ability right now while we're talking to take off your glasses and put on a pair of binoculars that look like kind of like you have pretend binoculars on your eyes, and just close those fingers around to make a little binocular. That is the vision of somebody in early and moderate stage dementia. They are losing the peripheral vision. They are having tunnel vision. If you do that and you try to look down at your shirt, you'll notice that you can't see what's on your shirt. You just can't see that. If you are walking and somebody comes up next to you, you don't see them coming, and so you can startle them. But at this point of the disease, the reason that she picked a ruby for this stage is because ruby is red, and red means stop. And so what stops are the fine motor in the fingers and toes, and then also the fine motor muscles in the mouth and the throat. And then they can also have challenges with the eyesight stopping. So basically the eyes are looking through these little binoculars. It's getting difficult to focus on which direction to look. And so the brain can functionally shut one of the eyes down. So if you just make a little monocle with your fingers and hold it up to your eye like you're looking through a pretend telescope, this is the vision of somebody in late stage dementia. This is the vision of a ruby. Very, very small visual field. And because of that very small visual field, they are at a huge risk for falling, because when you only are seeing out of one eye, you don't have depth perception. And without depth perception, you can't measure how far away the chair is or how far away the bed is. The other thing is there's so much of the world that they don't see. Take a time and go around with that little monocle on in the home. Go into the bathroom, for example, and notice, are you noticing that when I walk in and I'm only looking through one eye, I don't even see the toilet? Because that might be the reason that it's really challenging to get somebody to sit on the toilet, because they don't see a toilet there. There is a way to figure out which eye somebody is favoring and looking through the most. Sometimes you'll notice when they eat that they don't touch anything on the left side of their plate, or they don't touch the drinks that are sitting on the left side, but they eat everything on the right side and they drink everything that's sitting on the right. Sometimes if somebody has a walker, you'll notice that they stand up and you hand them their walker and they grab very firmly with the left hand, and then the right hand, they don't even attempt to hold that other handle, or they kind of flimsy around and can't find it. And that's again because their visual field is very small and they're only seeing out of one eye. And in this case, it's the left eye. This can cause a lot of problems when somebody's trying to sit down. And so sometimes rubies will walk and walk and walk, and they can't sit down because every time they think they see a chair, they turn a little bit, they can't see the chair anymore. And so they start walking and walking, and you might see that they're limping or that they have back pain. And we really have to help rubies to sit down. They have a hard time starting and they have a hard time stopping. The other part of those fine motor muscle problems are that they can have issues with swallowing and chewing their food. It does take a lot of finesse of your muscles in your mouth and throat to move your food around and chew it in the right areas and swallow it. So you might notice that they are pocketing food and they are starting to have this big lump of food in the cheek of their mouth. Why won't they swallow that? And it's because the muscles, those little muscles that are in the throat, those little muscles that are in the throat are not able to connect with the brain. So they're not able to move that properly to the back of their throat. They also might start coughing and choking when they're having food or beverages because it's a little bit of it's going down the wrong pipe. And that could be very scary because when they start coughing, it's very scary when somebody really can't catch their breath and they're coughing a lot. So this might be a great time to talk to speech therapy to see if maybe they could come in and do some sort of evaluation and see if they should have thickened liquids for their diet that are easier to swallow, or maybe a special diet that is pureed or just cut up really small to make things easier. When I talked about those fine motor skills that also stop in the feet and your toes, that is what starts a lot of problems with falls. So this is the part of the disease. If you're wondering if your loved one's a ruby, this is where you start seeing major physical changes. They start having balance issues. They start having trouble with walking and getting up on their own. They're not able to coordinate their muscles as they usually do. And when you don't have any movement or ability to move your toes and your brain can't direct your toes, you lose your balance. So tonight, walk around and just feel what your toes are doing. Spin some circles and see what your toes do because they keep you balanced. They keep you upright. And so what can happen at this stage of the disease for rubies are falls. Falls, falls, and falls. You've got a combination of no balance because of the toes. You've got also the vision problems that are happening. And then you have somebody whose memory is so poor at this point, telling them to just sit there and be safe and I'll be right back does not work. In order to get a ruby to really be comfortable, you have to think about what is it that they need, and it's usually a very basic need. At this point of the disease, most people have trouble with getting words out and expressing themselves. And so they're not able to talk and tell you what they need. And so when they are having something going on, maybe they just keep getting up, they keep standing up. Why won't they relax? You have to figure out what could it be? And is it something basic? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they incontinent and need to be changed? Do they need to go to the bathroom to have a bowel movement? Are they cold? Are they in pain? This is something that is very, very undermanaged in people living with dementia because you can't communicate. They can't communicate the pain they're having. So watch for signs. Are they limping? Are they sore? Are they restless? Because then it would be something to address. And the last thing that stops at this part of the disease is their wake and sleep patterns. Those are gone. That part of the brain that tells you it's daytime and nighttime and this is the pattern I should have is gone. And so they really start to spend sometimes 2 hours awake and then 12 hours asleep. And then all of a sudden they're up for 24 hours straight and then they're sleeping for 3. It's hard to really figure out how long they're going to sleep and when they're going to be up. And I always say, let sleeping rubies lie. They need the sleep. Their brain cells are dying. This is right near the end of the disease. And so we're looking at a lot of brain tissue that has shrunk and died. And we want to make sure that when they need rest, they get it. And sometimes that rest might be somewhere uncomfortable. It might be that they just fell asleep in the chair in the living room. And it's okay, because once they're asleep, don't wake a Ruby. Unless you're concerned because they've been sleeping so long that they need medications or that they need hydration, let's let them lay and sleep. So let sleeping rubies lie. When they get up, we'll take care of all the rest and get them what they need. Here is a picture of those vision changes I talked about. So on the left, you have a normal brain, and on the right, you have a brain at the end of Alzheimer's. And you can see the top part of the brain there. It's actually the back of your head, but this person has their head kind of, if they bent at the waist, bending down, you're seeing the top of their head. So up on the top there where those red circles are, that's the back of their brain. And you can see the difference that's happening to the vision center in their brain. And again, their eyes might be fine, or they might have their regular eye issues, but what's happening here now with the brain is not connecting things correctly to the eyes. So it's an issue with their brain, not with their eyes. The last stage I want to talk about for a few minutes, and then I'm going to just open it up for a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, I recommend that you put them in the chat box now, and I'll do my best to answer them, would be the pearl stage. And so the pearl stage is chosen by Teepa because from the outside, an oyster shell is not very pretty. It is really difficult to see that there's something so beautiful inside there anymore. And this is when somebody starts having trouble with their big muscles. So pearls are no longer able to stand. They are usually contracted at times where all of their muscles are pulling in towards the center of their body. They are mostly laying in bed, or they have a special Broda chair so that they can be out but also can nap in it. They are having a hard time connecting with the outside world. They sleep a lot. And with this part of the disease, it can be so hard for family members to see because at this point, the person I'm hoping is on hospice because pearls should be on hospice. They should qualify for hospice. And they have lost a lot of weight. You know, your pleasantly wonderful wife who was 170 pounds is now 110. And it's just really hard to see. They lose all the nutrition. The body isn't able to absorb nutrition the way it used to. So even if they eat and eat and eat, they still will lose weight. And the ability for their body to give nutrients to their hair and their fingernails and their skin, all of that is compromised now. So they don't look like they used to. They're not able to get their hair done in the salon, maybe. They're in bed most of the time. And again, somebody can eat and eat, but they will still lose weight. I had a woman who cleaned all of the food up off of her plate, drank everything, every meal, snacks too, and yet she was 85 pounds when she passed away. Her brain just kept going, but her body wasn't absorbing the nutrients. Now, with a pearl, if you give them a lot of time and patience, you can get that beautiful shell to open up and see them in there. And this can be difficult if you're maybe visiting for half an hour. Maybe it's not the time for them. Maybe they're not going to connect, but there are some things that are not affected by dementia that you can use to connect. And the biggest one is music. So any kind of music that they like. You can see a pearl who no longer talks at all or talks very little suddenly start singing along to all their old favorite songs, and you can connect that way. Another thing is that they may connect with talking about the past, reminiscing and using those long ago memories that are still there and talking to them about growing up. Where did they grow up? Where did they go to school? How did they meet their spouse? Telling them stories like that you know about their life might then get them to open their eyes and connect with you. And it takes a lot of patience. Sometimes it can take up to 60 seconds for a pearl to comprehend what you say to them. So if you say good morning, it might be 60 seconds later and all of a sudden they open their eyes and say good morning. And you're like, wow, where did that come from? It came from patience, giving them a lot of patience. They also like things quiet. They like things that are soft. They don't want a lot of busyness and loud stuff going on. They're really, really kind of having a hard time being trapped in that shell. And so we want to make them as comfortable as possible. One of the primitive reflexes that she talks about here is that when you have a primitive reflex, that means it's a reflex that you were born with. Now, what happens when you have a newborn baby and you put your finger in the palm of their hand? They grab your finger, right? Because that is a reflex that every baby is born with. And this is a reflex that pearls are left with. So if you put something in the hand of a pearl, they're going to grab it and they're not going to know how to let go. So sometimes they might be grabbing at the supplies when you're trying to change them or clean them up. They might be grabbing at your shirt every time. Whenever something's near their hands, they're just going to grab. And so it can be really helpful to put things in like a soft towel or a stuffed animal or something like that in their hands to hold while you're doing cares. Their skin is breaking down at this point, and being aware of possible bed sores and pressure sores is very important. If they are laying in a position, they can't move on their own anymore. So in order to have that body have some nutrients and oxygen come to that skin, you have to relieve that pressure regularly. I always recommend repositioning pearls every 2 to 3 hours, putting pillows between their knees, because if their knees rub together, they might have skin breakdown. Same thing with their ankles. If they're laying on their back, putting a pillow under their calves and being able to float the heels of their feet, because even having their heels on the bed might cause them to have skin breakdown. And many people think that the way people die from dementia is that they starve to death. And this is inaccurate. What happens to somebody at the end of dementia is your brain controls your entire body. And that includes how you digest your food, how you move, how you bring nutrients to your body, all of that. And so what happens is at the very end of this disease, when somebody is actively dying, their brain stops many of the important organs, and those organs start to shut down. And because of that, somebody isn't hungry, they're not thirsty, and they will stop eating. They won't show interest in drinking. Or if you try to help them drink something, it might go down the wrong pipe and start coughing. And so the muscles may not be working at all in their throat. So it isn't that a person starves and then dies. It's that the brain starts to shut down their major organs, and so they stop eating. And that is how somebody dies at the end with dementia. If something hasn't happened along the way that has caused their passing, and their brain just eventually cannot continue to go any longer, the brain shuts down all the major organs and eventually the heart and how they breathe. And that's how somebody passes away. Again, this is a really hard thing to see and a really hard thing to talk about. But I do want to take time now to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, so this is from Caroline. It said, based on this presentation, I would say that my mom has characteristics from several different stages. Does that sound typical, or am I misunderstanding the stages?
Yeah, that does sound typical, because people can change gems throughout the day, and somebody's brain may be just on a different course. For example, I know somebody who was in the early stages, so he was probably like a diamond and sometimes an emerald, but yet he had the monocular vision. This is the monocular vision of a ruby. And the reason for that was because he had the type of dementia that was caused by a head injury, and that head injury injured the back part of his brain and the front part of his brain. So those are where his dementia started, and the inflammation and the changes started to spread from there. So he just had things differently. Somebody might have a stroke in a certain part of their brain, and so they are having those vision changes much earlier, or they might have difficulty with speaking much earlier. But generally, if somebody has Alzheimer's disease, this is the pattern that they take. I always try to look at the last stages and understanding when somebody gets into those amber and ruby and pearl stages as looking at more physical changes. It's not always, excuse me, it's not always what's happening mentally or cognitively. It's more physical when you start seeing the balance problems, the trouble with eating, the trouble with swallowing, the difficulty sitting down or standing up. If something else that they have, like arthritis, isn't causing that, it means that they're starting to get to that part of the disease where their brain doesn't connect to their muscles.
Thanks, Amy. The next question is from Susan. Does a person with dementia go through each gem, like the stages of grief and loss? I'm trying to figure out where my mom would be. She has the elements of the first gems.
Yeah, so the early stages are going to be more cognitive changes, right? And then eventually some trouble with showering or brushing their teeth or dressing. Those are more of the cognitive challenges that somebody has if they are a diamond or emerald. And then when they start getting to those later stages, you're going to see more physical changes. So that is possible that your mother's in those earlier stages right now, if she's still physically able, unless she has some other problem like, knee pain or hip pain or something that prevents her from walking. That would be the early stages. I hope that answered that.
All right, thanks, Amy. Here's one more from John. Understanding that this journey is an individual one, can you provide estimates of how long the amber, ruby, and pearl stages might last?
I will tell you that the amber, ruby, and pearl stages go much faster than those earlier stages. Somebody may be a diamond for 10 years. It may be that when you look back, they may have been diagnosed 4 years ago, but then when you look back, you're like, they were kind of doing some strange things even before that. And many times they were hiding it, or it was so subtle that somebody didn't really realize that they had those dementia symptoms so early. So those beginning stages can last a long time, but then those end stages, the body and brain cannot compensate the way they do earlier. So those do go a lot faster. In my opinion, with the people that I've taken care of in memory care, amber, ruby, and pearl usually last 6 months to a year each. But I know that there are people out there. I had a pearl who I took care of. She was in the pearl stage and on hospice for 3 years. Her heart just kept on going. Her heart just kept going. The rest of her body was failing. She was just really, really thin. She was losing her teeth because her body couldn't support the nutrition of her teeth. It was really difficult for everybody to see, but she remained in that stage a long time. It's rare, but it is possible. Unfortunately, there's no magic calculator with dementia.
Amy, we had a couple in the Q&A as well, just a couple left.
Yeah, thank you.
One of those is any suggestions how to reply to paranoid angry patient who repeatedly is angry about delusions and stays angry all the time and verbally abuses caregivers, i.e., I haven't seen you in weeks when you actually visit them daily.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that happening many times where somebody doesn't think you ever visit them and you were just there yesterday. And instead of arguing with them, because you will never win an argument with someone with dementia, it is better to just accept what they have said as truth and apologize. I'm so sorry I haven't been here as much as you want me to do. I will do better because I love you. And just keeping the focus on you want them to be happy. So what can you do to make it right? That can be a way to, it can be hard to hear them every time being mad at you for something that you haven't done. But again, you have the healthy brain, so you got to think on your feet and find out a way to make this right, even if it didn't happen.
Okay, and it looks like there's one maybe in both. I'm going to make sure that it's the same. It says, what about Parkinson's dementia? My husband has both Parkinson's and dementia. He also had a TBI and has a history of seizures. What is the future?
Yeah, so when somebody has Parkinson's with dementia, that's Lewy body dementia. Again, the symptoms are very different. I've had many people who are able to remember who everybody is, where they're at, kind of the day to day, and know the people that are around them. but yet those physical changes are going to happen at the end. Those physical changes are still going to happen with Parkinson's with dementia, and they also happen with vascular dementia, which sounds like they have had some TIAs, which are like little mini strokes. So that is, again, another type of dementia. People can have mixed dementias. It's very common for people with vascular dementia to also have Alzheimer's. So it is possible for somebody with Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia to have vascular dementia as well. So the same thing is in store for them. That's how it works. That's how the brain can no longer control the body and those physical changes start to happen. Although I will say people with Parkinson's are really good at falling and not getting hurt, but a lot of times that's where a big injury comes in place and might be the end of someone's life because of falls.
It looks like I think we're going to take two more. I know we're a little over time. One of the last ones in the Q&A. My mom, I believe, is a pearl. She looks at me but doesn't see me retaining urine. Does this resemble the pearl stage?
Yeah. Is she physically having a lot of challenges? Is she no longer able to walk? Are her muscles sometimes contracting? Or she's just not able to control her body anymore? Sleeping a lot, really not connecting, not seeing you. That can definitely be the pearl stage. Also, though, when somebody's not seeing you or noticing you, I think about that vision of theirs. So put this on and imagine if, they're laying in the bed looking up, they don't see you sitting next to them. You have to approach them from down low and up front for them to see you. And sometimes you have to be a little further back, because if you have a friend do this with you really up close, you're covering all their vision now. So it may be that to connect with her, you need to really make sure you're down low and off to the side a little bit, but in her field of vision, and do physical connection so that she knows you're there and connect that way. And music is another big one.
Thank you, Amy. And then one more, and thanks everyone for sticking around a couple minutes after. Last question is, my father has trouble understanding technology and used to work in it. Is it best to just avoid conversations about his phone, etc.? I know I won't win an argument.
Yeah, that is a really common thing for diamonds to have trouble with technology, because those skills are gone with their short-term memories, and then all of our technology is constantly changing, and diamonds have a very difficult time learning anything new. You might want to switch back to a regular desk phone for them. There's also some ways to set up some settings on an iPhone to make the screen very, very simple. It's under accessibility. And then there's also a service called Raz Mobile, and they have a very simple phone where it's just pictures of the people that you're going to call, and they can't accidentally get into the settings or get into buying stuff or any of those other things that can happen. But many times it's good to go back to just a regular old phone and get them a landline. And there's also phones that are great. You can find them if you put in like Alzheimer's phones. You'll see that they have pictures instead of buttons for the numbers. So they can just push a picture of somebody that they want to call, and that can really help. Yeah, but that's tough when they used to be so brilliant at all of those things, and now they're having a hard time with some basic technology.